Have you ever considered that the things you strongly dislike might actually be like secretly pulling you toward their exact opposites?
I mean, it's a pretty counterintuitive thought, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Because, we spend so much of our energy pushing away the things we despise, whether that's a difficult coworker or financial struggles or maybe a political ideology.
Oh, definitely. We push and push.
But what if that very act of pushing is exactly what ends up trapping us? Welcome to today's deep dive. Today, we are unpacking a really fascinating and honestly, a pretty layered philosophical essay.
Yeah, it's titled Hating the Wealthy Will Lead to Poverty. It was written by Feng back in January 2022 and edited by Yu.
Right. And the core mission of our deep dive today is to explore the text's main argument, which is essentially that our consciousness and our focus directly shape our physical reality.
And it is a massive claim. We're looking at a text that basically operates like a philosophical Russian nesting doll.
I like that comparison.
Yeah, because on the outside, it presents these really vast, abstract, universal principles about how the cosmos works. But as you open each layer, it narrows down. You get human psychology, then global socioeconomics, and then finally, right at the center, highly specific lifestyle directives.
And before we get into the details, I do want to set a quick disclaimer for you listening, because the text delves into some pretty heavy socioeconomic and political examples. Class divides, geopolitical comparisons between specific nations.
Things that get people fired up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we want to explicitly remind you that as your guides on this deep dive, our job is not to endorse or take sides on any of these politically charged viewpoints. We are purely here to impartially map out the source material and convey the author's ideas to you.
Right, we're just looking at the framework.
Exactly. So to understand this author's worldview on wealth, we first have to understand how they view the structural balance of the universe.
Yeah, and the essay starts right out of the gate with this foundational concept. They call it the unity of opposites.
The unity of opposites, okay.
Yeah. The author posits this as an inescapable universal principle. Basically, the argument is that everything in the universe fundamentally requires an opposite to exist, not just as a concept, but like mechanically.
So if you have an up, you mathematically have to have a down.
Exactly. If you have beauty, ugliness has to exist to give that beauty any sort of comparative framework.
Right.
And so naturally, the text argues that if wealth exists, poverty is its mandatory counterweight.
It kind of reminds me of a shadow. Like you cannot possibly have a shadow without a light source. They are, eternally bound together in the same exact space.
That is a perfect analogy, because the crucial pivot the author makes here is that these opposites aren't just external realities. It's not just a tall mountain and a deep valley out in the world.
Okay, so where are they?
The text argues that this binary reality actually resides internally. They live within the exact same person, in human consciousness.
Wow. Okay, so if the light and the shadow are inside our minds, why does that matter for the rest of the text?
Because by establishing that the opposites live inside us, the author sets up the premise that we cannot mentally isolate one half of an equation without inadvertently triggering the other.
So if I pour all my cognitive energy into thinking about light, I'm simultaneously pulling the shadow along for the ride.
Exactly. You cannot interact with one half without binding yourself to its opposite.
Which, that brings us to the most surprising rule in the essay. Because these opposites are an internal package deal, the text introduces what we could call the paradox of repulsion.
Yes. The text explicitly says things tend to move towards their despised opposite.
And the examples they give are wildly absolute, like there is no gray area.
None. Zero middle ground.
Yeah, the text literally argues that if you dislike wearing clothes, you can only be naked. If you dislike the truth, you live in falsehood.
And it scales up to these massive existential stakes, too.
Right. Hating heaven pushes you to hell, and hating hell pushes you to heaven. Hating violence leads to peace, and hating peace leads to violence. It even goes so far as to claim that if you dislike men, you can only become a woman.
The sheer absolutism is super deliberate here. The author is methodically stripping away the whole concept of a spectrum.
I do have to push back a little on the biological literalness of that, though. When the text says hating men means you become a woman, are they arguing for a literal physical transformation? Or is this more of a psychological trap, like focusing entirely on what you hate inadvertently traps you in its conceptual extreme.
Yeah, based on the structural logic of the rest of the essay, we really have to look at it as a strict law of cause and effect within human
Okay,
consciousness.
so psychological focus.
Right. Think about how cognitive filtering works in the brain, like the reticular activating system. Your brain highlights whatever you focus on. So if your entire identity is built around hating falsehood, your brain is constantly scanning the world for
Right,
lies.
you become obsessed with deception.
Exactly. And the author argues that by doing that, you trap yourself in a world defined entirely by falsehood. You literally lose the ability to just inhabit the truth because all your energy is consumed by fighting the lie. Fixating on hatred acts as a magnet for the extreme opposite.
You tether yourself to the monster by constantly fighting it. You just become defined by what you repel.
Yes, exactly. And that psychological theory of repulsion is what the author then scales up to explain the economic fates of entire societies.
And this is where we hit the central thesis of the essay's title. Hating the wealthy will lead to poverty. The text argues that if an individual despises landlords, capitalists, and the wealthy, they will inevitably move toward being a poor farmer, a wage laborer, or a beggar.
The mechanism there being that your hatred acts as a firewall, right? It blocks the actions required to prosper.
Right. And then the author takes that from the individual and applies it at a national level. The claim is that a country that eliminates its rich people will inevitably move toward poverty, and despising civilization leads to backwardness.
But on the flip side, a nation where all members respect and protect the wealthy will become prosperous.
And the author provides some really specific, highly charged geopolitical comparisons here to anchor this.
Yeah, they do. The text explicitly contrasts nations like Israel and Japan with Zimbabwe and Venezuela.
Right.
The author's argument is that a collective poverty consciousness, like a cultural mindset of resentment toward wealth, literally creates a reality of economic collapse and poverty.
Whereas a wealth consciousness generates abundance. And they also claim that despising wealthier, more socialized nations leads to isolation and barbarism.
Which is a very intense way to frame global economics.
It really is. And again, jumping in here just to remind you listening, we are looking impartially at the author's specific framework. You're absolutely not endorsing these geopolitical or socioeconomic claims. Standard economics points to like a million external factors, trade, infrastructure, history. But we're just analyzing how the author scales their own philosophical theory to global economics.
Yeah, because in this text, external factors are completely secondary. The author connects deeply individual emotions like hate or resentment directly to macroeconomic outcomes. They're suggesting a nation's economy is merely a reflection of its collective mindset.
I was trying to visualize this, a whole nation doing this. And I kept thinking about driving a car.
Okay, driving a car.
Yeah, like imagine you're driving down the highway. Right. And you are absolutely furious at the car behind you. You despise them.
Oh, we've all been there.
Right. So you spend your entire drive staring furiously into the rearview mirror, just glaring at the thing you hate.
And obviously, if you do that, you're inevitably going to crash into whatever's right in front of you.
Exactly. You're physically moving forward, but your focus is entirely backward. That crash, according to the author, is national poverty.
That's a great analogy. It perfectly illustrates the danger of misdirected focus. By hyper-focusing on the perceived injustice of the wealthy, a society totally neglects the road ahead.
So it's a very harsh philosophy, really.
It is. It places total responsibility on the internal state. Your environment isn't making you poor. Your mind is actively engineering it through resentment.
Which begs the question. If hatred and resentment ruin individuals and nations, what is the author's formula for creating a prosperous reality? How do we stop staring in the rearview mirror?
Well, the text flips the coin to a positive corollary. The rule changes from you become what you hate to you will move towards what you like.
Moving toward what you like.
Yes. The text states that liking cleanliness gets rid of filth. Liking wealth overcomes poverty. Liking saints allows you to transcend mortality. Liking freedom breaks the shackles of slavery.
So the opposites still apply, you just focus on the positive one.
Precisely, and this all culminates in this massive declaration in the essay. Our reality is created by our consciousness.
But I had to ask, does the text imply that merely liking something acts as like a magic wand? Like if my consciousness simply prefers wealth, does it just magically conjure money in my bank account?
No, it's definitely not portrayed as passive wishful thinking. The text elevates the concept of consciousness far above just simple preference.
Okay, so more active.
Much more active. The text argues that consciousness is the primary architect of reality. A consciousness of wealth is an active state of being.
So it fundamentally rewires our actions and our physical environment.
Exactly. It's the blueprint. If you cultivate a true consciousness of wealth, your brain shifts. You stop seeing other people's success as a threat and you start seeing it as an opportunity. The internal mindset is the true cause, and the external reality, the abundance, is just the effect.
That makes a lot of sense. So this brings us to the ultimate reality the author discusses, which is heaven. And the essay provides a highly specific roadmap to get there.
It does. And this is where the essay takes a fascinating turn. Up until now, we've been dealing with universally accessible concepts: wealth, poverty, focus.
Right.
But to live in heaven, the text says one must first possess a heaven consciousness.
Which tracks with everything we've talked about. You want wealth, you need wealth consciousness. You want heaven, you need heaven consciousness. But how does the author say you actually achieve this?
Well, it's not by just meditating or being a generally good person. The instructions are incredibly specific.
Yeah, the text instructs the reader to look at the author's own descriptions of three specific things: the 1,000-year world, the 10,000-year world, and the Elysium Celestial Islands continent.
Right. And to be clear, these aren't just vague metaphors. These are highly specific, proprietary utopian visions outlined in the author's broader body of work.
And it goes even further. The text says if the reader doesn't believe those written descriptions, they should point their focus to the production and living scenes in the real second home on Earth to nurture this consciousness.
The second home being an actual, physical, intentional community.
Right.
It's a real-world attempt to manifest these utopian ideals, operating completely separate from traditional structures.
And the author warns that without this specific consciousness, without studying these exact models, no amount of practice or striving will ever allow you to reach heaven.
It's a very stark warning.
It is. And it's a fascinating shift because, the author starts this essay with a broad universal law of opposites that applies to everything in the cosmos, but ends with a highly specific proprietary solution. Why does the text insist we need these specific descriptions to unlock this mindset?
It's a brilliant narrative pattern, honestly. The essay is intentionally structured like a giant funnel.
Explain that a bit more.
Sure. So at the very top, the widest part of the funnel, you have the universal physics, the unity of opposites, light and dark. Everyone agrees with that.
Right, totally relatable.
Then the funnel narrows to human psychology, the paradox of repulsion, the idea that focusing on what you hate traps you. Again, most of us have experienced that.
Yeah, I was definitely nodding along with that part.
Then it narrows further into macroeconomics, resentment causing national poverty. It asks for a bit more buy-in, but it follows the logic.
Okay, I see where this is going.
And then, right at the tiny spout at the bottom of the funnel, the author presents their own specific teachings and the second home. The author positions their specific work as the essential, practical bridge required to cross over from a poverty mindset to a heavenly reality.
They funnel you right to their own front door.
Exactly. It moves from an open philosophical inquiry into a closed systemic solution.
Wow. Okay, let's bring all these complex ideas back to the listener and just kind of summarize the journey of this deep dive.
It's been quite the arc.
Seriously, we started by exploring the author's premise of the unity of opposites, the idea that light and shadow are bound together inside our own minds.
Right.
Then we unpacked the argument that hating wealth inevitably breeds poverty, because fighting the shadow just traps you in it.
We looked at the concept that our consciousness literally engineers our reality.
And finally, we examined the specific utopian pathways the author offers to cultivate that heaven consciousness, which brings us to the end. But we never like to just map out the philosophy and leave it there.
No, definitely not. We want to leave you with something to really mull over. I want to leave you with a direct challenge based on the source text today.
Okay, lay it on us.
Think about a persistent area of poverty in your own life right now. And I don't just mean financial. Maybe it's emotional poverty, an intellectual block, or a relationship that just feels totally drained.
Somewhere you feel like you're in a deficit.
Exactly. Now, based on the strict logic of this text we just analyzed, ask yourself, is it possible that your consciousness is accidentally fixated on the very thing you despise about that situation?
Are you glaring in the rearview mirror?
Yes. Are you spending all your energy focusing on the injustice or the frustration and thereby accidentally pulling that exact opposite closer to you?
Because fighting the shadow guarantees it stays.
Exactly. So the final thought is this. What would it look like tomorrow to completely flip that focus, to stop pushing away what you hate and begin actively cultivating a wealth consciousness for that exact problem?
Because according to this essay, the moment you stop fighting the darkness and start actively focusing on the light, your reality has no choice but to follow. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.